Greetings everyone, this is Connor from Degora TV, and in this video we're talking about how ESO and the Elder Scrolls Legends are in fact canon. The reason I'm making this video is because a YouTube video on my recommendations list popped up, and it was a video by a YouTuber called CamelWorks who got an interview with the game director of the Elder Scrolls Online, Matt Firor, and asked him a lot of questions about the upcoming expansion of the Elder Scrolls Online Somerset. And they come across the topic of lore and about how, if the lore's canon or not, and Matt Firor specifically says that the lore is in fact canon. If you want to see the full interview, I've got a link to it in the description below. Go check it out, it's actually a very good interview done by CamelWorks. But anyway, so as many of you will know, the Elder Scrolls Online and the Elder Scrolls Legends are like side games in terms of the Elder Scrolls series, as we have the main episodic titles, which are, Arena, Daggerfall, Morrowind, Oblivion, and Skyrim, and then along the way we've had these side games like Shadowkey, Redguard, Elder Scrolls Online, Elder Scrolls Legends, and a lot of people have pretty much taken it to granted, like I have, that all the games in the series all fall into the same story and they're all in fact canon. But apparently there were some people that didn't consider these games to be canon because of the amount of times that Elder Scrolls Online breaks the law, for instance. And that's why he asked this question, because he says that a lot of questions that he gets are is the lore in Elder Scrolls Online canon, and so on and so forth. And he talks about how they have a lore master. I believe his name's Lawrence Schick. I don't know if he's still there, but he was there before the game came out. And he talks to Bethesda Game Studios pretty much every day to try and make sure the lore is very much consistent and in line with what's going on in the main story of the Elder Scrolls. Which is all well and good and all sounds perfect, but as many people talk about, they talk about how many times the Elder Scrolls Online breaks the law, how they can have, Bretons and Orcs in the same faction of the Daggerfall Covenant, how Argonians and the Dark Elves can be in the same faction and everything, and also how Cyrodiil is not a jungle anymore because it's meant to be one of the major keystone points of Tyre Perceptum, was that when he came into when his rise to power, he used Chim to reset the world of Cyrodiil and basically remake it in a way, and changed it from this very jungly landscape to more of a forest-like than what we see in Oblivion. And now it's kind of a key tentpole event of what he'd been able to do. But then when we go through Cyrodiil in the Elder Scrolls Online, we see that there's actually it's more like what we saw in Oblivion, like a forest landscape, not very jungly at all. And that was kind of the one that I think irked the most people. And obviously, as fans, we're all going to kind of get up and say, that this is not what it's supposed to be like. We feel like you're broken law here, and people definitely share those concerns out. And obviously, in my opinion, that's the kind of law break that's not acceptable. But all in all, I do think the law, I'm the kind of person that follows the idea that law's there to serve the game, and the game isn't there to be slaved to the law. And by that I mean that if there's a choice that's there to be able to, if you have to break the law to make the game better, then I'm completely 100% fine with that. Like, we know, for instance, that it's absolutely ridiculous to have the Dark Elves and the Argonians working in the same faction. The Dark Elves enslaved the Argonians multiple times across the history of Tamriel and the history of the Elder Scrolls series, and we know that the Argonians obviously going to hold a grudge to that. When we play Skyrim, the Argonians very much share those concerns, and even in, Oblivion and Morrowind, we hear that as well. And in fact, in Skyrim, the country Black Marsh is kind of having a revenge attack against the Dark Elves and taking control of Morrowind, which is one of the most interesting side stories that we can say, in my opinion, of what's happening at the time of Skyrim. But in my opinion, the faction idea was something that made the Elder Scrolls Online a more interesting idea and more of an interesting project, having these three factions fighting against each other in Cyrodiil, fighting for control of the Ruby Throne was really, really cool. And while some people think that the PvP is broken, and I'm going to be honest with you, I haven't played an immense amount of Elder Scrolls Online. Overall, if I had to compare my time over the years, I've probably played about 60 hours of it, and probably started the game over like 3 different times on each different faction. So I'm not the best person to talk about what's broken and what's fixed in the Elder Scrolls Online. But what I've kind of seen in there, of when I played the PvP, I had a lot of fun in PvP when I played it, personally. And when it comes down to the story of the game, of what's going on with Marco and everything like that, is, trying to keep it centered to the lore as possible, but obviously it does break it in several different areas. And again, I do want to kind of emphasize my kind of point in this when it's that in fact it is canon, is that I don't really have an issue with this. I like the idea that when I want to go back to Elder Scrolls Online and play the game again, and I play through the game, I know that what I'm doing matters to the general story of the lore. And while, obviously, I think in every game of the series, you'll be able to find points of where the lore is broken, and naturally, you know, with the evolution of how we're using spells and everything in the game and how we control our character, with having a hotbar in the Elder Scrolls Online, to having spells you put in each hand in Skyrim, then to having spells that just you're able to cast different points, is kind of in a way a bit of a law break in itself, because like, how does it completely change from hundreds of years to whatever? But you know, we don't have to keep the same style of play every single time just to be consistent with the law. If it's making the game better and changing the game and making it more appealing, then definitely go ahead and do it. And I think that really, in reality, shouldn't be an issue to why it should be a massive complaint to say that these games aren't canon. And I think that can go along with the story as well, because a lot of the story of Elder Scrolls Online, when it comes down to the main story, is what people will take away of saying that is the story of the game. Of what I've seen on YouTube and stuff, doesn't seem to be in at all a bad story. It definitely adds to, you know, characters that we've heard about in the lore, like Man and Marco and stuff like that, and obviously finding a little bit more about really what the Elder Scrolls are really tending to be, and hearing more about, you know, what's happening to Moth Priest and everything, which is something that we can tie to Legends before, where the Elder Scrolls Legends is a game where we talk about, you know, completely different to what we experience in the Elder Scrolls universe of like an action RPG kind of experience. While ESO is an MMO and there's a lot of people running around, we are definitely, you know, it's more familiar to the kind of game style than what we're getting with Elder Scrolls Legends, which is a card game, and people are saying that as a reason of why the game shouldn't be considered canon, because it's completely different. But again, at the same time, it's video games, you know, like all the general story of it, the theme of the Elder Scrolls, I don't think should just be constricted to just, you know, one type of game, in my opinion. And while people will say, you know, obviously they're the best games, and I completely agree with everyone, when it comes down to it, the games that I want to play and play the most are the episodic 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you know, mainly the Holy Trinity of Morrowind, Oblivion and Skyrim. They're the games I put hundreds of hours in, and I've dabbled in Legends and ESO and not stuck around too long, because they're not really the kind of games for me. But to be able to say that because the main fan base isn't very popular with these two types of games, they shouldn't be considered canon, I kind of think is a little bit ludicrous, to be honest with you. There's a lot of lore books in the Elder Scrolls Online, for instance, that definitely do add to the story of the Elder Scrolls, and I don't think that we can just say that these shouldn't be counted as canon, or pick a few out that say that should be and shouldn't be, because then it gets into an immensely messy situation like what we had with, you know, Star Wars before they retconned the whole thing, or retconned a lot of the, you know, the lore books and everything when Disney bought the franchise. And I'm going to be honest with you, I don't totally understand why people didn't think it was canon. Like, I completely get behind the idea that if you don't like something in there, like, say for instance you don't like a game, you don't like a story of a game, but you'd like all the stories of the other games and all the side stories and everything, and you don't consider that main story to be something that's canon, I completely understand you, like, in your own head, because at the end of the day it is a fantasy RPG, you know, or a fantasy story where you can kind of get lost in it. You can kind of take bits of it and make your own story in your head, I suppose. And that's what really a lot of Harry Potter fans did when The Cursed Child came out. They kind of said that, you know, the story itself isn't something that is the quality of Harry Potter and what we like, so they just kind of pretend it doesn't exist. That's completely 100% A-okay, fine. And to be honest with you, I think a lot of Elder Scrolls fans will probably agree with that when it comes down to the story, to the idea of Tiber Septim, you know, taking down and changing the landscape of Cyrodiil. I think people will pretend that in the Elder Scrolls Online we didn't see what the world looked like then, because the explanation that Zos was given is that, you know, it was something. I remember it being something ridiculous like the transcripts were poorly translated or something in modern day, which is just not a good reason in my opinion. But, you know, we can go to the point where we can say, you know, they shouldn't be canon, they should be fan games, whatever. But I do like to have the idea in my head that when I'm doing stuff in these games, that we're able to have an effect on the world, and what we're doing is having effect on the story of Tamriel. I don't like the idea of, you know, the Dragon Break scenario, that there was a Dragon Break soon after the Elder Scrolls Online, and that it completely changed and rewrote history, and there's only a few books left in there and stuff. And, you know, there is a way, you know, for the Elder Scrolls series to change, you know, not necessarily change what's going on, but to be able to, you know, adapt their lore to accommodate a lot of the stuff that happened in ESO by new books and, you know, the Elder Scrolls 6 and everything like that. And I think that would go a long way to helping a lot of the fans that are not happy with this situation of the games being canon to kind of come around a little bit more, because, you know, at the end of the day, just because you don't like the game doesn't mean that the stories in those games shouldn't be canon, in my opinion. But anyway, thanks for watching. Please let me know what you think of this situation. You know, not necessarily whether you think the quality of the games is good enough to be Elder Scrolls, because if I'm going to be honest with you, I don't really play card games, so I can't truly speak to Legends a huge amount. Like, the only thing I know about it is kind of how different it was to you know, other card games when it came out, and like it added that kind of new element to it. Because the only card game I played was Hearthstone, to be honest with you, and I gave Legends a go for it. I played through the campaign, and I kind of left it there. And with Elder Scrolls Online, I was a huge MMO player, and I really wanted a lot from Elder Scrolls Online. I've talked about it a lot on this channel, and it didn't meet expectations for me. So when it comes down to it, I'm not really, you know, a fan of Legends or Elder Scrolls Online, whereas I am a fan of the mainline Elder Scrolls series. And while I do want, you know, obviously, I do like to jump into Elder Scrolls Online every now and then, it's not something that I kind of want to see, you know, is not something that I really stand on my back and say, you know, this is one of the best Elder Scrolls games. I don't think it's anywhere near the quality of Morrowind, Oblivion, and Skyrim, personally. And so I'm not really talking about the quality of the games, I'm talking about really the quality of the stories in those games. And whether you're happy that they're canon, whether you think it's obvious like I do, I think it's completely obvious it was canon, or whether you think it's just kind of stupid that it seems canon with the amount of times it's broken lore. Like, how much do you care? Definitely I want to hear from the lore people out there. What do you think about it? But anyway, thanks a lot for watching this video, and I'll speak to you guys on Monday for my next general gaming video. Thank you.